Officer Colin McRae, barking orders and reaching for his cuffs, cornered her vehicle. He had no idea the woman inside was a judge, and that she was walking into her own courtroom moments later. The resulting video would soon make national news and permanently derail his career. Tuesday mornings were a familiar ritual for Judge Renee Whitfield. She preferred to arrive early at the Fulton County Courthouse in Macon, Georgia, to beat the influx of lawyers and litigants who would arrive by 9 a.m. Her sleek black Tesla Model Y glided into the recently paved lot. She grabbed her courthouse badge, her eyes scanning the day's docket. It was a standard list: a few custody cases, a sentencing review, and a preliminary hearing for a local burglary. She was just about to pull into her usual reserved spot when she saw a flash of blue and red reflected in her side mirror. It wasn't the lights that caught her off guard, but the aggressive, sudden movement of the police cruiser as it blocked her in. There was no siren and no time to react. The officer's door swung open. "Turn off the vehicle and step out," he yelled, his hand hovering over his firearm. Renee's hand went for her badge on the passenger seat, but she hesitated. She knew that quick movements, especially from someone of her complexion, could be dangerous in this type of situation. Instead, she placed both hands on the steering wheel in clear view and met the officer's eyes through the glass. "Is there a reason for this?" she asked, her voice calm even as her heart rate quickened. He offered no reply. The officer marched toward her car as if he already knew exactly who she was, or more accurately who she wasn't. He was a white man in his mid-30s, with a rigid posture and mirrored sunglasses that made it impossible to read his expression. The name on his vest said McRae. Renee cracked the window just enough to speak. "Officer, I'm Judge Whitfield and this is my assigned space." McRae didn't slow. This vehicle was flagged. A stolen car from Warner Robins with a matching description. "That is incorrect," she said, her voice steady. "This car is mine and I'm on my way to court." He ignored her completely. Renee glanced around. A few courthouse employees were approaching the entrance, slowing down as they noticed the scene. One woman, a clerk named Janelle, pulled out her phone. "Out of the car." McRae repeated. "I need to know the grounds for this stop," Renee replied. His tone grew sharper. "Don't make this difficult." It wasn't fear she felt. It was a potent mix of disbelief, frustration, and a sudden, overwhelming understanding that this had nothing to do with a stolen vehicle. She was a 48-year-old black woman in a luxury car, dressed in a modest blouse and slacks, and none of that seemed to matter to him. Slowly, she unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door. McRae reached for his cuffs. "Hands on your head." That's when the first bystander began to record. Janelle had moved closer, her phone held up. Another man by the entrance, a public defender, was already on a call. Renee did not resist, but as she stepped out of the car she spoke again, her voice clear and authoritative. "My identification is in my briefcase. I am a sitting judge in this district." McRae ignored her, reaching for her wrist. One cuff was open in his hand. But she turned slightly, deliberately lifting her briefcase, which was on the passenger seat, and opened the outer flap with practiced slowness. Clipped to the front pocket of her black robe was her official judicial ID. She held it out, arm extended. "Judge Renee Elaine Whitfield, appointed in 2016. You're making a serious mistake." McRae froze. He blinked and for the first time looked directly at the ID. His mouth parted slightly. His hand stopped in midair. For a long second no one spoke. Janelle's phone was still recording. So was the public defender's. A third camera angle was from courthouse security. I thought," McRae mumbled, but the narrative had already been set. It was a story not in a report he was never going to file, but in the phone's recording on the courthouse steps. And this wasn't even the climax. What happened next would shake the entire city. A crowd was gathering. Courthouse employees, lawyers, even a couple of jurors who had arrived early. The air was already thick with a slow, creeping heat that made every second feel longer. Judge Whitfield stood still, her ID raised, while McRae fumbled with his radio, trying not to look at her or the growing number of onlookers. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need a correction on that vehicle report," he said, his voice low, the command he'd barked earlier completely gone. "Cancel the alert. Misidentification from the courthouse steps." Assistant de Darnell Vick strode down the steps purposefully. "What's going on?" he asked, looking at Renee first, then at McCrae. This is Judge Whitfield. Why is she standing outside her own car being detained? McCrae stiffened. We received a match on a vehicle reported stolen this morning, a black Tesla late model. I responded accordingly. She parks here literally every day. Vic shot back. Her name is on the space. Did you think to check the plate first? I acted on protocol, McCrae insisted. Renee stepped in, her tone still composed. You acted on assumption. You didn't ask for my ID before trying to cuff me. You didn't even ask my name. McCrae looked around, trying to assess the situation. Phones were still recording. Even court officers had stopped. A security guard who greeted her every morning just stared. Renee turned to Vic. Can you please escort me inside? I have hearings in 20 minutes. Vic nodded and gestured toward the entrance. But before she left, Renee faced McCrae once more. I suggest you get the body cam footage from your cruiser before it disappears. The silence spoke volumes. McCrae gave a stiff nod, still not making full eye contact as Renee walked up the courthouse steps, her briefcase in one hand, her robe still draped over her arm. The murmurs behind her grew louder. She handled that like a queen, a voice whispered. Man tried to arrest a whole judge. She could have been hurt. Inside the courthouse, Renee paused near security to compose herself. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing with questions, calculations, and replays of every second. She greeted the guards as she always did. One of them, an older man named Kenny, quietly said, "You good judge?" "I'm all right, thank you," she replied. Kenny leaned in. "That video's already on Twitter. People are heated." She nodded. "Let it go where it needs to go." Upstairs, in her chambers, she closed the door and sank into her chair. Only then did she take a deep breath. Not because she was safe, but because she knew what was coming. She was no longer just a judge, she was a symbol. She pulled out her phone and called her wife, Delia. "You at work?" Renee asked when Delia picked up. "I'm about to walk into a meeting." "What's wrong?" "There was an incident in the courthouse lot." "I'm okay, but it's spreading." Delia was quiet for a moment. "What happened?" Renee explained everything in less than a minute. Delia didn't interrupt. "Please tell me someone filmed it," she finally said. "3 people that I know of. Maybe more." "Good," Delia said. "Don't downplay this. You always try to be the reasonable one, but this isn't something we brush off. I know you're all right, but I'm asking, are you really all right?" "I wasn't scared," Renee said. "Just measured. Because that man didn't see me. Not even a little bit." Delia sighed into the phone. "You want me to come down there?" "No. I've got court in 10. I need to focus." They said soft goodbyes. Renee stood, put on her robe, and looked at her reflection. Her eyes weren't shaken, they were resolved. The outside world, however, was not about to be quiet. While Renee returned to the courtroom, the internet had already begun its own trial. By noon, the incident was more than courthouse gossip. It was a headline: Georgia judge mistaken for car thief by local officer. Confrontation caught on video. Within 4 hours, the clip had crossed state lines and was gaining traction on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. 3 different angles showed the same thing. A black woman calmly explaining who she was while a white officer ignored her, tried to cuff her, and only stopped when she produced her ID. The word assumption was in almost every comment thread. While the world was reacting, McCrae was in damage control. He sat in a small windowless office at the Macon Police Department, flanked by his supervisor, Captain Troy Dellinger, and a legal liaison, Felice Granger. The room smelled of stale coffee and old paper. "Tell us exactly what happened," Granger said, her tone firm but not unkind. McCrae rubbed his forehead, choosing his words carefully. "I got a dispatch alert for a black Tesla Model Y, no plates, reported stolen an hour earlier. I was 2 blocks from the courthouse, saw a match, and acted immediately." "License plate?" Dellinger asked. "No visible plate on the front. I didn't check the back." "You boxed her in, jumped out, and tried to detain her without confirming a single detail," Granger said. "You followed protocol?" "Yes, I did." "No, you didn't," Granger corrected him. "You acted on a description alone and skipped procedure. That's not protocol, that's escalation." McCrae leaned back. "I didn't know she was a judge." Granger didn't flinch. That shouldn't have mattered. Outside the police station, a small group of people was forming. One woman held a sign on a cardboard scrap that read, "She had to flash an ID to be seen." At the courthouse, Renee sat behind the bench, conducting hearings as if nothing had happened. Her face was calm, but her eyes scanned the room differently, more slowly. After court recessed for lunch, she found her phone overloaded with messages. There were texts from colleagues, emails from media outlets, and 2 missed calls from her alma mater. A message from a state circuit appeals judge she hadn't spoken to in over a year, James Pendry, read, "Just saw the video. I'm sorry this happened to you. Let me know if you need anything." She didn't reply. 10 minutes later there was a knock. It was Janelle holding a manila folder. "Judge Whitfield, there's a Channel 7 reporter downstairs asking for a statement." Renee took the folder, barely looking at it. "Tell them no comment. Not until I speak to legal." "You want me to call someone for you?" "No, but thank you." Janelle lingered. "I've worked here for almost 10 years. I've never seen anything like what happened this morning." Renee slowly closed the folder. It shouldn't take something like that for people to start paying attention. Janelle nodded, then paused. "He didn't even ask who you were. He didn't look at your tags, your parking spot. None of it mattered." Renee offered a small, weary smile. Because to him it didn't. Outside, news vans were starting to arrive. Inside the MPD, McRae's badge was turned over to Internal Affairs. The officer who had yelled commands that morning was now being asked if he understood the gravity of his actions, and how that split-second decision would haunt his career. "I didn't mean any harm," he said. "Intent doesn't erase impact," would become a recurring phrase in the days to come. The story wasn't about McRae anymore. It was about a system where even power and a distinguished position couldn't protect a person from being seen as a threat. By the next morning, Judge Renee Whitfield's name was being spoken in homes across the country. The video aired on CNN and MSNBC, and a segment on Good Morning America was titled, "When Justice is Mistaken." Georgia judge stopped, nearly arrested, outside her own court. The weight of the moment came not just from the national coverage, but from the conversations it sparked in barbershops, on school buses, and at dinner tables. People weren't just watching the video, they were reliving their own experiences. "She didn't yell," a man said on a radio call-in show. "She didn't cuss him out. She just stood there and held up that ID like, 'You messed up.'" It was powerful. Renee, however, wasn't celebrating. She hadn't asked for this spotlight. It was a hot, fast burn, and she knew it would rarely stay on what truly mattered. By Thursday, she sat across from a local attorney she trusted, Geraldine Fry, who had represented public officials before. Fry understood the fine line between public relations and legal responsibility. "You haven't spoken publicly," Fry said, pushing a glass of water toward her. "Smart. But it can't stay that way forever." "I'm not interested in a media tour," Renee replied. "I'm not a victim. I'm not a symbol. I just want to do my job." "You are a symbol now, whether you like it or not," Fry said gently. "People are paying attention. What you say next matters more than any sentence you've ever handed down." Renee leaned back, exhausted not by the attention, but by the fact that none of this was a surprise. She had been followed in stores, ignored by valets, but this, nearly being cuffed 10 feet from her own courtroom, was different. "I stayed calm," she murmured. "You did," Fry nodded. "He didn't see you. Not as a judge, not even as a woman. Just a problem to be stopped." Later that afternoon, Renee decided to read some of the comments on the original video. She had been avoiding them, but she wanted to know what people, not the news networks, were saying. One comment from a woman named Latrice in Birmingham stood out. "I teach my daughter to be respectful, calm, and clear. I used to think that would be enough. But if a judge can be treated like this, what chance does my baby have?" Renee stared at it for a long time. In her next hearing, her voice was steady, but her sentences had a little more weight, her tone a little more steel. The attorneys in her courtroom could tell something had shifted. Back at the MPD, Officer McRae was in a second Internal Affairs interview, this time with Community Oversight Board members, an IA detective, and his union rep. "Did you recognize the badge when she showed it to you?" the detective asked. "Yes." "Did you apologize at that moment?" I said I'd made a mistake." "Did you release her immediately?" I froze. I was surprised. She told you who she was before you attempted to detain her. Why didn't you stop? McRae's voice dropped. I thought she was trying to lie her way out of it. You thought a black woman in a suit, pulling into a reserved judicial parking space with a courthouse briefcase, was lying? He didn't answer. The silence said everything. Civil rights attorneys from 3 different organizations had already requested the footage and radio logs. The city council was being pressured to review traffic stop procedures. The mayor's office released a vague statement about accountability. Through it all, Renee still hadn't spoken to the press. But something was building, and when she finally spoke, it wouldn't be about what happened to her, but about what keeps happening to everyone else. By Friday morning, the Macon City Hall press line was ringing non-stop. The video had surpassed 1 million views. Activists called it textbook profiling. But Renee Whitfield's silence made people pay even more attention. Pastors incorporated the story into Sunday sermons, and teachers brought it up in high school civics classes. A group of teenagers even recreated the incident in a theater workshop, trying to understand it. At the Macon Police Department, the pressure was now coming from within. Captain Troy Dellinger was being questioned by city officials. Why was Officer McRae still on street patrol with that many complaints? A council member asked in a closed meeting. Because none of the complaints were sustained, Dellinger replied. Or maybe, Councilwoman Mariah Campos leaned forward, no one ever took them seriously. This isn't about one bad judgment call. This is about how many times we ignore the warning signs until someone with a title gets hit. The room fell silent. Meanwhile, at her home, Renee was ironing her robe, the same one she was wearing when McRae reached for his cuffs. She walked out onto her porch with a coffee. Her wife, Delia, joined her. You know what you're going to say yet? Delia asked. Renee shook her head. Not entirely. You don't have to be poetic. Just be real. That's the hard part, Renee said. People expect me to be polished, careful not to ruffle feathers. Then maybe, Delia said, it's time you stop worrying about that. Later that day, Renee received an email from Georgia Public Broadcasting, requesting an exclusive interview. The email was respectful, simply stating, "We believe your voice matters more than ever right now." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she drove to Millard Park without her robe or makeup, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. She sat on a bench alone where she and Delia used to bring their niece to feed the ducks. A woman named Tasha sat down nearby. "You're the judge, right?" she asked gently. "I am. I just want to say thank you for how you handled that. For staying calm." Renee turned slightly. "I wasn't calm for his sake. I was calm for mine. I've spent my whole life making sure no one has an excuse to twist my reaction into something I never intended." Tasha nodded. "We shouldn't have to live like that." "No," Renee said, her voice steady. "We shouldn't." Back at the courthouse, the district's chief judge, Vincent Yarrow, called an emergency meeting. "The rope doesn't always protect us," he began. Everyone in the room understood. Some were uncomfortable. Others, the black and brown judges, exchanged knowing looks. "Do we issue a public statement as a judicial body?" asked a newer judge, Ariel Boone. "We don't normally take positions on personnel matters." Yarrow hesitated. "This isn't just personnel," Ariel insisted. "This is about perception. The people who come into our courtrooms deserve to know that we see it too." Renee wasn't at the meeting. She was home thinking not about damage control but about the truth. On Saturday morning, the local paper, The Telegraph, published an article titled, "Officer in Judge Incident Has History of Civilian Complaints, Why No One Listened." The story, by journalist Kimora Stratton, revealed McRae had accumulated 15 complaints in 7 years. Within hours, other outlets picked up the story. The narrative shifted. It was no longer just about the incident with Judge Whitfield. It was about a pattern. Outside the police department, people held signs with every complaint number McRae had ever been tied to. At the courthouse, Renee read the article in her chambers. She read every word, highlighting specific paragraphs. Here was the proof that she wasn't an isolated case. What happened to her was inevitable because the system had never corrected itself. Later, she met with Judge Ariel Boone and 2 retired justices, all black women. "We've all had our McRae moment," Ariel said. Another shared a story about being mistaken for a caterer. They were not surprised or even angry, just tired. Renee set her cup down. I think I'm ready to speak. Not for the cameras but for the people watching this who have never had the words. That same day, McCrae was quietly placed on paid leave. The mayor's office sent a confidential email to Captain Dellinger. We cannot keep him on the street. Public trust is too fragile. Take action by Monday. By Sunday evening, Renee knew she couldn't wait any longer. Her inbox was full of requests and a few hateful messages, but what weighed most heavily was the silence from her colleagues. She sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open, a small notepad beside her. Delia stood nearby. Are you sure you don't want a speechwriter for this? Delia asked. Renee shook her head. If it doesn't sound like me, it won't mean anything. She clicked record. The video was under 6 minutes with no edits or script. She sat in front of a bookshelf looking directly into the camera. My name is Judge Renee Whitfield. Some of you may know me from a video that circulated this week. A video of me being stopped outside my own courthouse, mistaken for a car thief. Her voice was calm and clear. I've heard this was an unfortunate mistake. But this was not a fluke. This was the result of a system built on fast assumptions and slow accountability. She paused. I stayed calm that day not because I wasn't angry, but because I've learned how dangerous my anger can be perceived. I stayed calm so I wouldn't give anyone an excuse to escalate what never should have happened in the first place. She didn't name McCrae. She didn't need to. If this can happen to someone with a badge, a title, and a robe, imagine how often it happens to those without. Imagine the people who don't have 3 video angles to protect their truth. She ended the video with a statement on grace. I'm not here to destroy careers. I'm here to protect dignity, mine and everyone else's who's been told they don't belong. She uploaded the video to her court's official account and her personal one. Within an hour, it had over 40,000 views. The comments were from people who had been stopped, questioned, and doubted, and who had never heard a judge speak so plainly. She said what we've been screaming for years. Not all responses were kind. One user posted a screenshot with the caption, "Maybe next time don't drive a Tesla if you don't want to be profiled." Renee didn't respond to those. That night, sitting on the porch with Delia, she said, maybe it didn't make a difference for the loud ones. But someone out there heard what they needed to hear. The next morning, her video was played on PBS. The conversation was no longer about Renee but about systems and perception. Renee walked into the courthouse through the front entrance. A young man in a hoodie waiting in the security line stepped aside and said, "Thank you for staying calm, ma'am. You didn't have to, but you did." She met his eyes and nodded. "I did it for all of us." Her phone buzzed. It was a call from the Georgia Judicial Conduct Board. "We just wanted to inform you," the woman on the other end said, "that based on your statement, the state is reviewing standard law enforcement interactions with court officials. And off the record, thank you." It woke some people up. Before the story could end, Renee had one last thing to say to the one person who had changed everything. 12 days after the incident, she requested a meeting with Colin McCrae. They met in a quiet, neutral room. No cameras, no press, no robes, no uniforms. He entered first, hunched over, his posture telling the story of someone who had lost everything. Renee walked in a moment later, calm and poised. "I didn't call this meeting to punish you," she said. "I called it because I need to understand not just what happened but how you got there." He looked up for the first time. "I thought you were someone else. I didn't see the judge or the badge. I just saw someone who looked like they didn't belong in that car. And I didn't stop to ask." "I get why you did it," she said, her expression tired. "What I don't get is how many times you've done it without anyone holding you accountable." "More than I'd like to admit," he shook his head. "That's the part people don't see," she said. "They think what happened to me is rare. But I wasn't special. I was just finally visible." He looked at her again. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't," she said. "But I don't excuse you either." Before she left, she looked him in the eye. "You may never wear that badge again, but you still walk through this world with choices. Don't waste another one. You didn't end my career, but your choices exposed everything that needs to change about yours." And with that she was gone. Later that night, she spoke at a gathering hosted by the Georgia Association of Black Lawyers. "People ask me what justice looks like," she said. "I used to think it was about rulings and balance and fairness. But now I know justice is also about recognition. It's about seeing someone fully before reacting. And sometimes justice looks like holding up your ID not just to be believed but to survive. She paused. This should have never happened. But since it did, I'll use the moment to ask for more than apologies. I want reflection. I want reform. And above all, I want people to stop needing a title to be treated like they belong. The room rose in applause. That night, Renee and Delia walked to their car, the same black Tesla. This time no cruiser blocked them. Delia smiled. You did that. Renee shook her head. We did. All of us who have ever been second-guessed for no reason at all. We finally had a moment where someone had to look back and see what they missed. She got in, the engine humming to life, not loudly, just present. The city was still flawed, the system still cracked. But something had shifted. And Renee was still standing, still judging, still believing in a version of justice worth fighting for, even when it refused to see her at first glance. Because no one should ever need to flash a title to be treated with respect. And if her story taught the country anything, it's that awareness is the first step toward change.